Hey everybody, this is Andy Melbuff, and in this video we're going to take a look at how we can use the pattern function in Desmos Activity Builder to check student input formats. Now here's what I mean by format checking. Let's say we have a particular question we're asking students to simplify and write an expression in standard form, and the question involved is 3 plus 2t plus 6. Well, that's pretty simple, but students could enter 9 plus 2t, and that would be deemed correct up here according to the check, but it's not in standard form. And actually, students could just simply type in anything that has the same value expression-wise. So they could type in the exact same expression that they see right there in front of them, and this again checks as being correct, even though it's clearly not the format we want. We want a format where they simplify like terms and write it in standard form. So we can take care of this using the pattern feature in Activity Builder. So I'm going to jump to the next screen, and still in preview mode here, and I've got the exact same question, but now I've put in some patterns in the background and see it in computation layer, and we can take a look at that. Here's that same question, and if the student types in 2t plus 6, I'm sorry, 2t plus 9, not 6, it is deemed correct here, and they're able to submit. Now I don't have any feedback built in here. I'm just showing you the pattern feature. But if a student types it in reverse order, for example, algebraically that's the same amount, but format-wise it's not in standard form. Notice over here, this is an error message. If a student hovers over it, they get a little message saying this is not in standard form. And also notice right here, the submit button is disabled. So anytime an error message is enacted, students are not able to submit. So we can use this as a way to give them a little prompt, check your result, it's not in standard form. And if they simply retype their answer, but they do put it in correct form, then they're able to submit and that little warning message goes away. So let's jump into the background on this and see how this looks. I'm in edit mode right now, and I've got just a simple note here with my question, and then I've got a mathematical input down below. And all the computation layer is in this mathematical input. So let's see what's in here. Now first of all, the patterns function involves using the word patterns, and we're going to have to use it a lot. So what we do, what typically I see the people do online, is they typically shorten it up. They do a little abbreviation. So I'm going to let P be a variable equal to the variable patterns, or equal to the word patterns. So anytime I want to use patterns, I'm going to type in a P. Then I need to describe what do I want format-wise for the student to enter. Well, a lot of kids, when you ask them to use a variable other than X, will still use X. And if you want to be specific and say pay attention to the variable, you can do that right here. So this particular portion, I'm going to set the variable t, and I'm going to let that be equal to the pattern literal t. In other words, what this is going to tell students is if they don't use t, they're going to get that error message. So that's going to require them to use the variable t. Then I want to have my desired format for the students, and I have my little notes here. I want my format for this question to look like ax plus b. We're going to have some coefficient times, and I should change this from x to t. We're going to have some coefficient times t, and then we're going to add a constant to it. So what we're going to do is create this variable, desired format, and it's going to be equal to, and this looks a little bit long here, but I'm going to try and walk you through what's going on. P means patterns. So the first thing we want is we want to recognize that this desired format is the sum of two terms. So I'm going to use patterns.sum. Sum is one of my featured members of the patterns library. I can use sum. So I'm going to be adding together two terms. Well, let's look at the first term now. The first term is a product of two things. It's the product of a coefficient, and it's the product, along with that coefficient, there's the variable t. So inside of sum, I'm going to use patterns, product, and what do I want the product to be? I want the product to include an integer, comma, and the variable t. So the part that's highlighted that you're looking at right there is going to say the format the student uses needs to have some integer times t. And that's going to be my first term. My second term comes after the comma, and I'm requesting that the student use an integer. And then this part that I'm highlighting right here says we're going to take the sum of that product times integer times t with another integer, and that's going to be my desired format. Now I want you to notice here afterwards at the very end I have dot strict order. That means basically it's going to require the order that I have listed there. It will eliminate the students from doing the constant first plus the coefficient times t last. So after I create this desired format, then I need to compare it to what the student puts in. So I create another variable, and I'm calling this correct format. And I want the correct format to be the desired format if it matches the student's input. Then my error message is a sync, and what I start out with is when the correct format is present. Double quotation marks. That means nothing will show up under the error message. And if nothing shows up, the error message basically is disabled, or basically the student can go ahead and proceed and press the submit button. But if the correct format is not there, here's the message you saw in the orange triangle. It's not in standard form, and therefore the submit is disabled. Now the last part of this, and this really isn't too necessary for this because I'm talking about the patterns library, but I put a correct check in, and I use a simple function correct check, which is covered in other videos. Notice that I'm using the variable t here, not the variable x, but I do want you to see what my correct variable looks like. We're using evaluate at twice, which is pretty common to do, but I'm tagging on at the end correct format because I want the correct format as well as numerically the correct terms. So that's a quick look at how we can make sure the format is a certain way, for example in this case standard form. Now next we're going to go through a little bit of what I would call a build along. We're going to try to put one of these slides together where we use some of the features of the pattern library. So I have a question set up here that's very similar to the one we just looked at. We're going to ask students to simplify terms in an expression and write them in standard form. Now, just a quick preview on this screen, we desire an answer of 9x minus 4. That's our desired format. So I just kind of want that floating around in your brains for a moment. And we're going to go down here to the input, and I've already named it input because I'll need to use that. And notice the little warning triangle. Okay, there's something wrong in here, and that's because I left a lot of this incomplete, and we're going to go ahead and fill it in. So I'm going to jump into the computation layer, and I started out with p equals patterns again, just so I'm not typing the word patterns repeatedly. Then I want to decide what variable do we need our students to use. Okay, in this case we're using the x variable. So I'm going to make a variable x that follows the pattern of being literally x. Now the part that is enclosed here in backticks, that's for LaTeX, and basically this part is saying students must use the variable x. They cannot use any other variable. Okay, so that's a pretty short start there. Now here's our desired format. We want two terms connected with subtraction, so we're going to say difference. We want the difference of two terms, and our desired output is 9x minus 4. We're just going to keep that in mind. So my desired format is going to be following patterns. Here are all the options available to me, the members of this family, if you will. There's a lot of different things that could be done with this. So I'm going to go down here and I want to use difference because now I'm looking at the difference of two terms. And those two terms are going to go in this parentheses here. Now the first term, let's take a look at the first term. The first term is 9x. That's actually a product. So inside of this parentheses, I'm going to start with p dot product. And what is my product going to contain? Well, I'm going to have the first part of the product is going to be 9, so I'm going to call that an integer, p dot integer. Then the second part of the product is going to be the variable x. Well, I've already defined what x is right up here, so I can just simply use the letter x, and it recognizes it as a defined variable. Then I need, after this closed parentheses, after my product, I need the second part of my difference. So I'm going to use comma, and the second part of my difference is right here, and that's simply an integer. Now, it could be an integer. You could call it a number if you wish. I'll go ahead and use number just to be a little bit different here. And so we've set up our desired format. That's what we wish students to use when they enter their results. Now, I want to compare that to what the student, I want to compare this desired format to what the student inputs. So in my correct format here, I'm going to use that desired, sorry, I can't spell, that desired format, and I want to make it match. So I want its source to be matches. And what do I want it to match? From the input component, what does the student type in for its LaTeX? That's how we compare, that's how we match. My error message, I left the same as before. When the correct format shows up, nothing shows up for the error message. But if the correct format does not show up, then the student gets this message and the submit button is disabled. Okay, lastly down here, I didn't change anything with the correct check, although I did adjust the numbers down here. I just wanted you to see that format. So let's see how it looks when we go to preview mode. Now, if we want the students to type in 9x minus 4, let's start by typing in 9x minus 4. No warning symbol. Good. Check mark. What if the student were to reverse these two terms and write negative 4 plus 9x? Now, algebraically, that's the equivalent, but it's not in standard form, and it's not following that desired format pattern, so consequently, they get this error message, submit is disabled, and the teacher dashboard shows they did something incorrectly. So that's a signal to us if you're working in a class and you see that X pop up and stay there that the student needs some assistance. And so that's going to wrap up this video on using the pattern family of functions in order to help us produce certain student formats. Thanks.